plans and the climate impact of their energy work. Ensuring that their energy systems are climate resilient is critical, but also making sure that buildings are future-proof and can, for example, deal with higher temperature in the next few decades. So what can cities do to reach this level of ambition that we've defined? Well, we think there are 5 high-impact strategies for decarbonizing the energy supply that cities should be looking at. The first one is to set an ambitious commitment for municipal consumption of electricity, and to set a public target to do that beyond municipal operations by 2030 and by 2050. We think cities should also work to enable building scale renewables, and so helping, for example, for the deployment of solar PVs on rooftop. Cities should lead by municipal energy, as I've said before, either solar, as I've mentioned here, but also potentially the use of heat pumps or other types of renewables as relevant, or solar water heaters, for example. Cities should incentivize large-scale clean energy generation for their own operations, or by helping to bring together consumers to sign large-scale PPAs, for example, off-site PPAs. And finally, cities should promote clean energy sources for heating and cooling in buildings. I won't talk too much about heating and cooling today, because most of the work we're doing at the moment has been focusing on the electricity sector. Why is that important in a post-pandemic world? Well, I think it's been showed over and over again that clean energy is a win for climate, but also a win for economic development and for quality of life and well-being. The numbers I've used is just one example of those numbers that I found in IRENA's latest Global Renewables Outlook that sets up a pathway for an energy transition by 2050. What they show is that prioritizing clean energy sources in the energy sector by 2050 can really help not only to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in a way that's compliant with the Paris Agreement, but also to create millions of jobs, 100 million of jobs in the energy sector in 2050, 42 million of those jobs in the Asia Pacific region, which is very interesting. It can also increase global welfare gains by up to 13.5%, and that's defined by gains in terms of education, in terms of employment, in terms of improved equality, for example, but also a higher global GDP. Again, that's true at the global level. That's also true for the Asia Pacific region, and actually it's true for all regions across the globe. I think one thing that has been shown to be very important during this pandemic is the importance of resilience in looking at the energy system. And again, relying on decentralized renewable energy sources, for example, can really be an asset in strengthening the overall resilience of the energy system. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a taste of what cities are doing, talking about those high impact strategies that I've defined just before. In terms of setting an ambitious 100% clean energy target, well, 23 C40 cities have adopted a version of 100% renewable energy commitment. Some of those targets are for municipal operations only. Some of them are citywide and cover electricity and heating. Some of them are only for electricity. And then, as you can see on the table on the left, around the world, so beyond C40 cities, around 370 100% targets have been adopted by 250 cities. So this really is a movement that cities are starting to embrace, mostly, to be frank, in North America and in Europe, but also in other regions like Latin America or even East Asia. I took the example of Tokyo here. Tokyo published a zero emission strategy a few months back. They have a 100% decarbonized energy target by 2050. It's a very good target because it also has very strong milestones along the way. It explains how they're going to reach that by focusing on municipal buildings, by focusing on decentralized solar, but also they insist on the importance of working hand in hand with the national government and helping to drive national ambition on renewables. Finally, an interesting part of their strategy is a focus on innovative approaches such as hydrogen, for example. Again, it shows how cities can help to drive innovation by making those bold commitments. The second example I wanted to talk through is Quezon City, that is leading for their municipal buildings through on-site solar PV. They've got a program called Solarization of 50 public schools that aims to install 5 megawatts of solar PVs on a number of public schools around the city. This project is supported by C40 and our finance facility. And what it shows is that there are challenges relating to lack of technical capacity, to lack of fund for project preparation, and lack of help for legal and institutional support. But the business case is there. And with C40 support, the city is aiming to first work on this pilot and then move to potentially more municipal buildings across the city. Another example of leading by example for municipal operations is Melbourne, that has set up a renewable energy project. That's what it's called, a few years back. And basically what they're trying to do there is drive change through their municipal procurement strategy. They have signed up a PPA with an 80 megawatt wind farm that you can see in the picture that enables them to cover 100% of their municipal operations electricity demand with this project. What's particularly interesting in this project is that they've worked with other stakeholders to bring them on board. Universities, for example, but also private businesses have joined them in signing this contract, helping to build a bigger wind farm, but also helping to show to businesses, universities, and other stakeholders that actually it can make sense. Well, it does make sense to source renewables. There are cost savings to be had. There are jobs to be created. 148 jobs in this particular example. And the project is now being replicated. The fourth and last example I wanted to talk about is Seoul. They've got a program called Solar City Seoul, where they incentivize building scale renewables and specifically solar PVs. And what's very interesting there is that they make a direct link with avoiding the construction of a new coal or nuclear plant through the deployment of small scale solar PV across the city. They've got an ambitious target of 1 gigawatt by 2022, installed on 1 million households. And they've got a number of measures to support that. I've listed some of them here, but just to give you a taste, a local feed-in tariffs, low interest loans, etc., etc. They estimate that $1.4 billion will be invested in this project, creating over 4,500 jobs. So just to conclude, I think the time is right now for cities to prioritize renewables in their energy strategy. The COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated the feasibility of a renewables-based grid, and I've put the example of Italy on the right, but we can see that because of reduction in electricity consumption, grids have actually integrated higher level of renewables, and they've worked very well, they've operated very well, which kind of shows the feasibility of switching to more variable sources of electricity. We've also seen that behavioral changes are actually possible. It does make sense then to put renewables at the heart of cities' recovery strategies, and it can really help to accelerate the energy transition, but also to create local jobs, to decrease emissions, and to improve quality of lives. And that's all I wanted to talk about today. Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Constant. We'll try to share my screen here also. Thank you very much for that presentation. I think it's extremely interesting to see all the achievements done by these 4 cities that you put up as an example. I will present a little bit about sustainable urban energy. It's quite a big topic for 10 minutes, and we're focusing here on Asia Pacific, which is quite large region also. But I would like to talk a little bit about the challenges that are in regards to developing sustainable urban energy, which hopefully will be a good jump into the panel later, where we have seen the great examples, but also what kind of challenges that we are facing here. So this is probably a screen that many of you have seen before. We obviously are facing a great urbanization. In the beginning of 20th century, about 15% of the population lived in cities. In the middle of last century, by 1950, about 30% of the population lived in cities, and now more than 50% of the world's population are living in cities. More than 2/3 of the energy consumption are in cities. Some figures shows even more, up to 75% of the energy is consumed there. And the cities contribute to more than 70% of the carbon emissions. We have about more than 30 megacities in the world today. Looking ahead at 2030, we are expecting more than 40 megacities in the world, whereof about 35 will be located in the Asia Pacific region. So there is a great challenge for cities that are growing, which actually facing even more challenges than what they have today. Furthermore, there is a great diversity in the region. Looking at Asia Pacific, there is a huge difference in terms of climate, economical development. What are the different sectors in the city that are contributing mainly to the energy consumption and thereby the carbon emissions? Looking at some examples, if we take Singapore, for example, where the building sector is dominant, Shanghai, where the industry is dominant, or here in Bangkok, where I'm sitting now, where the transport sector is contributing a lot to the carbon emissions. This shows that there is no one solutions for cities, but it has to be tailored plans that has to be developed, just like C40 already have presented, and I hope we will hear more about. Other things that impact the development of sustainable urban energy systems are the fact that we have different trends. We have obviously electrification that is going on rapidly. We have decarbonization and we have digitalization. These are not necessarily trends that are great challenges, but actually provide great opportunities for us. And what do we mean with sustainable urban energy? I think Constant put a very good point there in regards to resilience. I think that is super important. We can imagine the challenges that cities are facing. They hear about different concepts that are more or less trendy over time. Many of us here today have worked with eco-cities, low-carbon cities, smart energy cities, a lot of different concepts, but what does it really mean with this? I would say personally, my attention is got when we talk about circular economy and energy symbiosis. That I think is super important to have a little bit of a new grip in regards to cities. And when we talk about energy symbiosis, what we have to do is simply to integrate traditional energy systems. We have Reggie here today, Reggie Kumar from India Smart Grid Forum, where smart grid is one of the key things, obviously, but also the integration of other infrastructures. So when we talk about multi-energy system, integrated energy systems, we're talking about the integration of gas, electricity, heat, cooling, and storage. And that is simply, easily speaking, we have to look more at integrating the electrical smart grid with the different district energy technologies. So smart electrical grids and smart thermal grids. And then comes the great question, then what is smart grids then, or smart energy? That is also a popular word. And do we need smart energy? I think it's important to look into the characteristics of these systems when we're looking at it. If you look at the end consumer's perspective, there is a great need or a demand for affordability, reliability, safety, and then low carbon footprint is also getting attention among the public. But also flexibility. Some consumers are looking into becoming prosumers to maybe even produce energy through their solar PVs or other things, use their electrical vehicles in a more integrated system. And if we look at from an energy system perspective, what are we looking at then? Well, we are looking at integration, definitely. So system integration, like I mentioned here, but also integration of local resources. We have to look where we are standing, what kind of resources can be used in a larger extent. We need flexibility. It's flexibility both in terms of changing demands, but also in terms of how the cities are developing. because obviously they are developing and we have to develop our urban energy systems. To some extent, intelligence, it could be both intelligence in terms of machine learning or AI applications, but also intelligent engineering solutions. Like I mentioned, reliability and safety, efficiency, obviously, but not least, competitiveness. I think it's important not to forget the importance of finding solutions that are competitive and that make sense financially in order to be able to develop these systems. So with that said, I think it's not easy to define these multi-energy systems, and obviously it will not be easy for cities to get a grip on it. So what the cities are working on and what they have to relate to is the different global agendas that we have there. I have listed 3 here. We have the Sustainable Development Goals, we have the Paris Agreement, we have the Montreal Protocol with the Kigali Amendment, but how are they related to each other? There are links, definitely. And as we have heard from C40, and we will hear more in the panel, these are the agendas that are often getting attention from the city representatives rather than talking about specific technologies or specific components or things like that. So what is interesting here to hear, and that's what I would like to link over to the upcoming panel, is how do the panelists and their organizations works with cities and these different global agendas? That is one of the questions. And then I would like also to take with us here, what are the challenges that they see when they're facing the city's representatives or developing urban energy systems? So I will stop my screen here, and I hope that all the audience will see all the panelists here. So I will make a short introduction of everyone. We have Mr. Teresa Oy from Asian Development Bank. We have Arnaud de Villiers from Aid Energy. We have Per Dalin from DevCo. We have Reggie Kumar from India Smart Grid Forum. And we have Rebecca Chan from C40 Cities. Great to have you here all. So I will repeat the questions that I would like to just hear from you at the first round. So how do you work in regards to the global agendas? And what challenges do you see or hear or meet from the cities when you're developing projects? I think we will start in the order of Teresa Oy.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I work for the International Financial Institution, and I have more 10 years experience working in China, Mongolia, and during that period, I have done a lot of projects in district heating, and up to recent is a district cooling. And now,
I think we lost Teru there. We give it another few seconds and see if it comes back. We move on to Arnaud.
still the energy planning in South Asia is dominated by the central government. I think strategy from a municipal government in terms of how to deal with the energy is blank, or there is not much policy coming out from a municipal government. So the region that I work right now, South Asia, I think that the municipality has to be advocated or educated more that energy matters for the cities, and that is also needs to be part of their assets. Because the city I came from, Tokyo, Japan, Tokyo is the mega city. And if Tokyo fails, Japanese economy also fails. So, city takes responsibility and to make sure that the city always alive and then make people comfortable to live. By doing so, municipality will increase their assets, their value of the cities. So I think that this is very important because even the mega cities exist in the many cities in all over the world, but if the city is not comfortable to live, I think global people or businessmen or local residents do not like to live in that city. So I think, from that point of view, I think the region that I work for right now, South Asia, I think city has to think about the energy is their asset and something that they have to control. Thank you.
We lost you a little bit there in the beginning, Jeroen, but I got that you see that the cities are taking a great responsibility to achieve these goals, and that there are lack of policies. That is what we got there. Please, if it was something else you would like to persuade in the first minute of your speech, please repeat. It's fine. Okay, then we go on to Arnaud de Villiers.
I need to unmute my micro. So hello everyone, happy to be here. So I am Arnaud de Villiers, as introduced by Michael before. I am CEO of Adel Energy in Shanghai, so working mainly for Shanghai and also some other part of the world. Before I was working in France, and so I have got 25 years around. I'm getting older in energy field. To answer your question about challenges for developing sustainable cities, the previous one, yes, for sure. When we can develop a mix of energy thanks to a solar or wind farm, it's the easiest way. But after, you have a big issue concerning all the users inside the city. And users are multiple. You don't have only one user. You have several owners. You have hospital. You have schools. You have a commercial building, residential area. And in fact, most of interest, but sometimes the interest can be divergent from the point of view of the developer or the local municipality. So for me, the challenge is really how we can save energy inside all these different owners, developers, or government. And against the point of view could be different from several people. For me, in fact, better energy is the one we not consume. And for that, we need to really go and to see not only on the city level, but on the user level, how we can save energy, how we can decrease the energy consumption for all consumers. And it is for me the most challenge. Even if cities or government, local government promote sustainable policy, subsidies or whatever, it's the difficulty for everyone is to understand these subsidies, to implement some reduction of energy, because they are not professionals. They don't know how to do that. They are looking for solutions all the time. And generally, so what we do in cities for doing that, we are going for new district, new area, because it's easier. You can implement local policy in the beginning. And is what is doing by urban planning and also a local institute. We promote a smart city, a sustainable city for new district, new area. Okay, we built it. And after, the issue we have and the challenge we have when we go for construction or for operation, in fact, because of budget, because of lack of people, at the end, we don't really achieve the goal we expected in the beginning. So for me, it's really the challenge first, how we can deliver in saving energy for the owners, and after that, how we can also operate it inside the buildings and save energy all the time.
Oh, sorry, thank you very much, Arnaud. I will move over to Per Dahlin.
So I'm on mute. Yeah, my name is Per Dahlin. I'm president of DevCo District Energy Venture. We're a team that's been developing district cooling now for more than 25 years around the globe. And if we come to what we are doing to try to facilitate this, is that we got involved with the preparation of the Kigali Amendment in 2015. And we introduced the district cooling as the not-in-kind solution, which was an important pillar as an energy efficient solution, and also a way of getting out of this HCFC and CFC, HFC refrigerants, going over to natural refrigerants, absorption cooling and free cooling. And we can say that we since then been engaged with UN and MLF, other multi and bilateral and regional funders for creating national plans, and also, as Teru said, capacity building. This is a lot to do with education. But at the same time, we also work in this, setting up these national plans is also to find pilot projects. I think it's absolutely necessary to have showcases. Instead of a lot of feasibility studies, etc., we also have to get something on the ground. And as it is now, these works with these institutions are in a very intensive phase, and we aim to have the first pilot in these programs up and running, or at least going to construction here within a couple of years. And one interesting funding of this is that when we look at it from a more global perspective, is that we see that district cooling in almost all regions are financially feasible. It's a good investment. By having a solution that is 4 or 5 times more efficient, it pays off. So it also has a market drive in it. But then, Michael, as you said, when it comes to the challenges, this type of integrated energy systems are complex. Many stakeholders, many sourcing and production alternatives, large number of permits, legislative, financial, big investments, etc. So to enable that, the importance is that to build up the capacity within the cities, or the city administration, or the ones who should host or being the anchor stakeholder of this development, and to be able to govern that. And also to have experienced and dedicated operation developers in place. And to do that, and I see that a lot, that we make big plans and it looks nice from a theoretical perspective, of course, but it's also it's important to make the master plan and the roadmap to a city-wide system. But at the same time, not forget to build it up in phases or in steps. So to make less risk exposure. So my conclusion is that plan big and long term, but act in phases. And I can take just one example from when I was in the utility world from in Stockholm, when we built up the district cooling system that still is the biggest in Europe. We had about 10 subsystems before we integrated them to 2 big ones with 4 production plants. So plan big, long term, have the holistic and the governance process in place, but act in steps. And I think that is one of the keys. And sometimes we try to do too much at once. That's my conclusions.
Thank you very much, Per. We move on to Reggie Kumar.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you, Michael and Peter, for inviting India Smart Grid Forum to this very important side event of ACEF. Delighted to be here with the eminent panelists here. India is working along with the international community on all major agreements and developing or decarbonizing our electricity system. Today we operate the third largest grid or electric power system with 370 gigawatt of installed capacity, of which about 85 gigawatt comes from renewable energy. 35 gigawatt is from solar, and of which more than 30 gigawatt we built in last 5 years. So we are pursuing an ambitious renewable energy program of 175 gigawatt by 2022. We hope COVID will not have much impact on meeting that target. We are well on way to meet that 175 gigawatt with renewable energy by 2022. Currently, this 80 gigawatt, which I said, 85 gigawatt, which I said, contribute to about 8 to 9% of the total energy consumption, kilowatt hour we consume in a year. So our commitment to Paris Agreement is that we will be doing something like 35 to 40% energy from renewable sources by 2030. And our Honorable Prime Minister has already made a commitment in September last year that by 2030, we are going to set the target for 450 gigawatt renewable energy. So 175 2020, we will more than double it to 450 gigawatt by 2030, and plans are well on its way. And the prices of this have come down drastically because the last major project which we have bidded last week, the price is somewhere like less than 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, compared to many other international prices, it may be still higher. Like a couple of months ago in Abu Dhabi, the lowest price discovered in the world is 1.03 US cents per kilowatt hour. So we are far from there, but still at between 2.5 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour from solar farms, it is much cheaper than building new coal plants or hydroelectric plants. So solar and wind along with battery storage is going to play a big role, and we will see that our grid is also flexible. There used to be doubt among everybody, including myself, how much of flexibility the grid has it. But on 5th of April, our Prime Minister told everybody to switch off the light at 9 p.m. and for 9 minutes light candles or torch light. And most part of the country, everybody done that. And the fluctuation was almost more than 25%. That's about 32 gigawatt of load at the peak time. It came down and we could ramp up and another 15 to 25 minutes back to the original load. So the grid is high voltage and medium voltage grid is already flexible to this level of 25% flexibility within 30 minutes. It's already shown, and the digitalization, which is going to see a much bigger uptake in post-COVID world, we will see the digital grid will be able to manage successful integration of PV, the all renewable resources, and also electric vehicles. So more on this in the next question I will add. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reggie. We move on to Rebecca from C40.
Yeah, hi, good evening or good day, everybody. So my name is Rebecca Chan. I was really privileged to start my career by being part of the very exciting solar boom across Southeast Asia. And now I work closely with our Southeast Asian cities, leading the region's C40 Climate Action Planning Program, where we work with each city in a bespoke manner to develop their ambitious climate action plans that are in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Yeah, so essentially what we do with each city is that we start from an evidence base, taking into account their emissions profile as well as the climate risk. And then this process and this evidence base then guides the prioritization of specific climate actions And then we focus with the city on these specific actions for deeper implementation planning, all with the goal of ensuring that the city not only generates a climate action plan, but one that is realistic and implementable. So one of our main objectives of this work in our program is to look at climate action in an integrated manner. So we're not just looking at decarbonization in itself or emissions mitigation in itself, but also taking the opportunity to consider other concerns such as around adaptation, like intensifying climate hazards or opportunities to piggyback other infrastructure updates that are needed with the view towards adaptation. And in addition to that, also we evaluate how climate hazards and policies might affect certain vulnerable groups in cities more than others. I think one of the discoveries that we have as we work closely with our cities is that I think it's come to light a bit with COVID as well. I may be jumping ahead, but certain communities are less able to respond to climate risks and hazards compared to others. And so we try to find ways to ensure that climate action is developed inclusively and also promotes equity. So what we try to do is that when we put forward a policy or an action with the city, we also need to examine that it doesn't exacerbate existing spatial or socio-economic inequalities that already exist in the city. And so, I mean, we're not looking towards we're not looking at addressing the inequities directly head on, but at the same time, we try to look for avenues in which climate action can promote greater equity. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you very much. I would like to put up a question that is open to anyone to respond to here. So we are, depending on where we are in the world, but we are in the pandemic period anyway. So I would like to ask you, what opportunities do you see that are there when the economies are restarted post the COVID-19 pandemic? Do we have anyone interested in answering?
Would you please repeat the question?
So we are in a stressed period at the moment with the pandemic, right? The economies are a bit stressed here, but what kind of opportunities do you see here after the COVID-19 pandemic in order to develop sustainable urban energy?
What I see and hear and read in the last 3 months is that almost all countries are looking at a green revival plan in which renewable energy and electric mobility going to play a central role. I live in the most polluted city in the world, New Delhi. Our PM 2.5 level, 6 to 8 months a year, it used to be above 600. Till 2 years ago, we didn't even have a meter to record that, above 500. So, but with the lockdown happened within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks of the lockdown, the pollution came down. So we all thought that maybe it will take 10 years for us to clean up the city, but it doesn't take that. It's reversible and it can be done in real time, in few weeks and months. So all new infrastructure which we are planning and building, all new systems which we are planning and building should be towards low carbon growth rate. It's possible, and I believe that every country will look at that. And the international organizations like C40 and other stakeholders and ADB kind of financial institutions will also support only those type of plans.
Do we have anyone from the C40 representatives who would like to chip in?
Yeah, so COVID has put a lot of things in perspective. And so a lot of our cities, as we are discussing with them now, we're kind of wrapping up understanding the emission scenarios and the climate risk. And now, we're starting to add on the consideration for not just disaster risk response, but in other emergency response systems. And that kind of ties very closely to adaptation as well. And so as we head into this action prioritization stage, where we start to figure out which actions are more feasible than others, which actions have more interesting benefits outside of the original mitigation or adaptation benefits, then COVID has seemed to started to have a strong influence on the criteria that we use and to score actions and to rate them with the cities in our discussions as well. And I think a lot of it is coming from the consideration of, yes, disaster response, business resilience, as well as impacts to informal settlements and workers, and how we can build better resilience for a future situation like this.
Anyone else of the panelists? Per, Arnaud, Teru?
Okay, I'll say something on that. I think this pandemic brought the situation that must work from home, whomever possible to do it. So that will, for example, myself, I don't go to office to work. I stay at home. So my mobility, I mean, using a car, going to the office is last 3 months is 0. So that contributed to energy efficiency per se. And also reduce the air, I myself contributed to reduce air pollution reduction. The same thing that I experienced. So I think this, and now digitization is there, like what we do, this webinar. So I think a combination of this technology and then also people who has to go to the work, and then that's fine. But I think in overall, I think our lifestyle has been changed. And then I think urban energy consumption will also change drastically. So I'm not sure whether it's a good opportunity or not, but I think for the individual's quality of life, and we have to maintain the big buildings to hold many workers, I think that can be changed in the very near future. So that's my observation.
I think I can react on that because it's interesting. It's what I wanted to say. Habits are changing. People are working more from home, and so change a little bit, not only the mobility, but also the usage of the building. And usage of the building, tomorrow you need more and more to understand what's happening, who is coming today working, who is not coming, and to adapt all the consumption inside the building to this new form of working environment. And for owners, it will become complex, but in the same time, it's a chance, because maybe you can also decrease the space needed in the city center, or you can have several other buildings, better offices, closer to people, because it's opening many new situations. And for that, more and more, you're right, we need to have digitalization, and the digitalization will help you to be more sustainable. It's what we also promote since a few years now, and it's becoming more and more important for the future.
Yeah, maybe I could add as well. Infrastructure initiatives are, of course, a way of stimulating the economy, and this time I think we have a golden opportunity to do it as a part of the energy transition. And therefore, when I'm looking at my field with the district cooling, it will not be a lot of job creation in a very short term, but the plans can come in place, and in the midterm perspective, it can definitely be something that both stimulates new efficient infrastructure, job creation, and also offloading of the electricity grids. As I used to say, district cooling is an energy efficiency infrastructure. So I think that as it is now, we see what happens in New Delhi, for example, that it can swap over to something better. And I think that put the right plans in place now will be good also from a financial perspective in the midterm perspective.
Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to address one question to Reggie there about your great development in regards to your electricity sector. How do you work in regards to integration of thermal grids and things like that?
Well, good question. So, past couple of years, we've been trying to bring some of the thermal power plants into variable. It used to operate earlier above 70% PLF. That used to be the minimum. So now our regulators allowed thermal plants to be operated at 55% PLF, and there are some technologies which particularly it comes from Germany. So they promote that plants in Germany and some other countries being operated at 29% PLF also. So flexible operation of thermal plant is something which we have experimented, and now many of the operators, they have developed confidence in doing that. That's one good thing which we have actually done for that 5th April 9 p.m. also for that 32 gigawatt. It was completely not everything digital, but controls were all digital and we could do that. So in addition to that, what is actually happening, then all new capacities being created. If you look at it globally also in 2019, more capacity was added globally in the renewable energy area. Same goes for India also, with solar panel prices coming down by 80% in 10 years and battery prices by 90%. India Smart Grid Forum, we prepared a energy storage roadmap for India. And out of the 175 gigawatt, which I said, 40 gigawatt is rooftop solar. That's one area where so far it has not taken off, and which we have been pushing hard, very from various corners to take off that. It's only 10% achievement as of now. Only 4 gigawatt we have done out of 40 gigawatt, which we have targeted till 2022. So the rooftop is connected to the low voltage grid. Electric vehicles are also going to be connected to the low voltage grid. And all the work which our big think tanks and other people have done, including international development agencies which supported India on renewable energy development, all work is happening at high voltage level. We built a green corridor, the dedicated transmission corridor to evacuate the power from large wind farms and solar farms. All those work, nobody had done any work on the low voltage, medium voltage and low voltage side. This particular work which we have done in 7 states, we did the load flow studies to see that how this 40 gigawatt can be integrated with low voltage and medium voltage grid, and we came out with some real numbers, how much gigawatt hour of battery capacity we require in the low voltage grid. And moving forward, we have an electric vehicle program, so that is also going to be connected to the same low voltage grid. Interestingly, today only in there was a very interesting article in Clean Technica which says that the marriage of PV and EV made in heaven. So this is something which we have been advocating for the last 2-3 years. So both this rooftop solar connected to the low voltage grid, electric vehicle also connected to the low voltage grid, both could support each other. When a cloud moves, all on a sudden the rooftop production comes down, the batteries in the electric vehicle could support the grid, vehicle to grid or vehicle to building technologies which are maturing. So this have been experimented in many places, and the battery technology is also maturing. Now Tesla and CATL recently announced a 1,000,000-mile battery, 1.6 million kilometer guarantee for the battery life. Just imagine, no car is going to run for that much 1.6 kilometer. So the still live, I mean, batteries which are capable of many other applications will come out of the abandoned cars, 10-year-old, 15-year-old cars will come. So those are all going to get into the grid actually. So this, we are going to see very interesting combination of this PV plus EV marriage supported by the batteries.
Thank you very much for the insights, Reggie. I have a question again to C40 here as a city representative in the panel. So obviously when we develop sustainable urban energy, there are cross-sectoral engagement required. There is a high degree of energy planning required. What is it that you see in the cities that you work with? How mature or advanced is it in that aspect in order to achieve these sustainable and integrated urban energy?
Sorry, was on mute. Yeah, thanks for your question. Yeah, as we work with our cities, part of the scenario modeling towards litigation that we look at is also considering the growth rates which the city expects to undergo between now 2030 and 2050. So not only are we looking at population growth, but how that ties into energy demands and how the city needs to respond to that. So if you're looking at grid decarbonization, it's not a static thing. Your energy demand is still expected to grow as you decarbonize. So those are considerations that we have to take into the modeling work that we do with the cities. I think the biggest challenge that we have, particularly with Southeast Asian cities, comes with the data. I think it's no surprise to everyone here that our cities don't have that many powers on the national level with regards to managing power generation and the grid transmission end of things. So what we're trying to do and encourage our cities to do as well is to interact and engage with their national providers more and the national agencies more in order to tap on the wealth of data that those agencies might have, and to then tie it into how the city will project moving forward with regards to decarbonization, and also that ties into the other policies regarding distributed renewables, because only by working really closely with your national level partners are you able to establish other policies and programs like rooftop solar, whether it's commercial or rooftop or residential. And in most of our cities, as I think Constance might have mentioned, we always encourage them to start with municipal buildings first, because that is the low-hanging fruit. That is an asset they already own, and then it's easier to negotiate with the grid provider.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Before we move on to the Q&A session, I would like all the panelists, if you have any question to each other, please feel free to raise them. Otherwise, we move on to the Q&A session, and we have a number of questions already. So I will see, we will try to take them in order. The first one was directed to Per Dahlin, and the question is, are district cooling systems still considered efficient when they are now operating on part load condition, that is, as it is currently during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think, well, it depends on the system architecture, of course, but as it is well, from a production way, many of the district cooling systems some are built up on only chiller perspective, and then I think that is the question about part load. But in many places with a mixed production, you even get more efficient, because you don't need, well, the peak production that sometimes is a little bit less efficient as base load. So I can definitely say it's considered, but district cooling can be many set up in the production's perspective. But I would say yes on that one, and since it's a multi-functional production, you can always optimize even if you go on pure chillers to a very good efficiency. Yes.
Thank you, Per. Thank you very much, Per. We move on with the questions here. So we have one question. I think also now when we are in the Q&A sessions, Jacqueline and Constant, feel free to grasp some questions also, or to answer. The reason why I'm saying that is now there is a question about the waste to energy. So what is the status of using waste to energy in urban areas, considering that people living here generate a huge amount of residual wastes? Is this also considered a clean energy?
I can answer this one maybe. This is not a best practice that we recommend at C40. Burning solid waste to produce electricity from a waste management perspective is definitely not best practice, but also it has some impact in terms of air pollution, for example. So we would recommend to deal with solid waste in a different way. I'm not a waste expert, so I don't know if one of my colleagues know more about that, but definitely would not recommend that as a best practice. of course, capturing landfill gas and using it to produce energy, on the other hand, is something that we strongly encourage.
Maybe, Michael, I can step in a little since waste to energy has moved up. Sweden today, if we take that country as an example, has about more than 25% of the cooling is produced by district cooling. And like last year, waste to energy was the biggest source for the cooling. And I think there is a different opinion from different countries, but we even import waste for not only electricity purpose. It's like when you burn it, it's for electricity, but use the heat for district heating and the heat also for the district cooling purpose. So it has a very important, and we see a lot of, it gives an extremely high total efficiency, and the pollution side is well, from a Swedish perspective, it's not a problem. And you have it next door in cities. So I think it is some difference in opinion about it. But I also see that if we go from more developed countries and waste problems, etc., of course, have see to how you sort out your waste. So what are you burning? Of course, but it could be one of the biggest tools for actually also being the source of cooling and district cooling. So I see a huge potential in many, especially on development countries and islands, where smaller waste to energy plants could be the source for electricity and heat going absorption to cooling. So that's the trend I see, and of course have to think about pollution, but it's definitely doable, and there are good examples.
If I can just add one thing very quickly, we've got Advancing Zero Waste Declaration that has much more information than what I know about it. So if people want to know more about what we think is best practice, hearing completely your point, Mark, but they should look at this document. That will be more informed than I am.
Great.
I wish to add that I have seen waste to energy plants in cities in China where everything is burned and the emission which comes out is well below EU norms. They are displaying from the live SCADA even outside the plant, and the waste goes to road construction and landfill and other things. So and some metal comes out. It's an entirely different system design. In 2017, when I visited one plant in southern China, they had some 34 or 35 cities where that kind of plants were operational. And now I hear 700 cities, they have made it mandatory. All the solid waste goes to everything, from food waste to everything goes to these plants. They just outside the city, they burn everything and they produce electricity, which the city government is, the electricity distribution company in the city is mandated to buy at 50% more price than the grid power, because this constitutes only few percentage of the total electricity used in the city, but they have to give a premium so that these plants are self-sustaining. Nothing is sorted out. All thing comes, and the whole plant is robotic. Only stones and other things are there which they remove it. Everything else is burnt. So it's a very, very successful system which you have seen.
Thank you very much, Reggie. We move on with the questions. So I will try to pick some here. So if we look at the cities again here, so how do you keep the city's interest in sustainable urban energy now in these times when the focus is put on many other, not least in the pandemic?
So I can say a few words about that. We've had conversations with our city during the pandemic, trying to make sure we are able to address their needs and the concerns that they have at the moment, and be as helpful as we can. I think what is important is to try to showcase the business case for renewables. A lot of cities we work with have their city budgets really impacted by the crisis. So trying to showcase how they can actually save costs in some cases through renewables, but also how renewables can help them, again, to have a sustainable economic recovery by creating local jobs in the solar PV installer sector, for example. And so that's definitely, I would say, one aspect, focusing on the economic. The second, as I mentioned before, is resilience, and explaining how, for example, for emergency services, relying on distributed generation and storage, for example, can be a good solution in the medium term. We've got an example from Portland, for example, where they have installed solar PVs on firewoman station with storage to make sure that their services can respond in the emergency at all times. So trying to explain again how that can help cities dealing with disasters is another way to keep them engaged, and they really see the value of that.
Just to add on, because the Southeast Asian experience, so what we are working on with our cities at the moment kind of shows that if you're looking at the electrification of fuel switch away from fossil fuels at the consumer level, that means the electrification of buses or switching from charcoal cooking stoves to electrified ones, the grid also then needs to be decarbonized in order to have the decarbonization both upstream and downstream. Because if you electrify your buses but everything is still being generated by coal, you're not getting the entire equation quite right. And so there are immense opportunities behind that. And when we highlight these to the cities, and they can see in not just in the pictures and the modelings, but the other benefits that we then also communicate to them in terms of air quality, better provision of public services to your citizens, then they really see an opportunity to keep that momentum going with their citizens as well.
Thank you. We have one question about hydro.
We are
energy.
building.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Reggie.
No, in India, we have a plan to build 100 new cities and rejuvenate 500 existing cities. So many programs, many discussions, thing going on for the last 4 years. So we have been advocating that there has to be strong policy measures mandating certain things, which I'll explain. And there has to be very different design of the city, different design of the building. Then comes the equipment design and appliances. So start with the city design. There's no point in people crisscrossing the city 40 kilometers for work or for education or anything. It has to be walk to work. That kind of, at least 90% of the people walk to work or walk to school, walk to for recreation. So that kind of a city design need to be there. The buildings need to be mandated to have energy efficiency. We talk about net zero buildings and all that, but nobody talks about how many kilowatt hour per square meter per year. Most of the average building today, 200 to 250 kilowatt hour per square meter per year it takes. Some of the old buildings in North America is 400 kilowatt hour per square meter. But experts say that today's design with the materials, we can do anything from 55 to 70 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. We should mandate that all new buildings should be well below 100. Nobody is doing that. We give platinum, gold and all that kind of ratings, but nowhere it says that it should be a number we are not specifying. So also every building by mandatory, they should display at the building, large commercial buildings or a housing colony or anything. What is the energy they are real time consuming? It is there in many emission norms are displayed, and also should say that how much they are contracted from where, how much is the carbon footprint of that particular property. This can be done with minimum investment today through new technologies. So that will promote people to going in for a building for rent or buying where the energy consumption is going to be lower than the adjacent building or across the street, or the more clean energy and lower carbon footprint. I am prepared to pay a higher premium for that. Those kind of things should come from few corporate places where it is happening. It has to come to the common man's daily life on the street. This has to be done through mandate. Then only this will happen. I take another 1 minute to say how things have changed in the past couple of decades. My first summer in Delhi, I came from Kerala to Delhi. My first summer was 1982. Temperature never went beyond 42 degrees centigrade. Last year it was 48.5 0.6 degrees centigrade. This 6 degree which it has gone, of which at least 4 degree has gone up only in last 10 years. And in 1982, there were less than few 100,000 vehicles in the city. And you could count on your finger how many cars were air conditioned. Today, you can't see a single, we have more automobiles in Delhi than next 4 large cities in India put together. You rarely find a non-air conditioned car. At this rate, by 2030, Delhi temperature will be well above 50 degrees centigrade, and it will be unworkable during the day for people unless you provide a cooling environment. Providing cool environment is going to be the major challenge. I see reports which says that by 2050, the cooling electricity consumption for cooling will be 3 times more than what it is today. So how is it going to happen? We need to look at this redesigning and also imposing very strict measures. Thank you.
I think it's a great point, Reg, and in regards to cooling, it provides livable cities, right, an environment for people to work and study, not least. So this also then naturally would come with higher energy consumption. So I would like to address the question to Per. How do we deal with that?
How do we get it going?
Get it going, get it.
I think that I'm back again to what Teru said earlier. It's about well, the education. It's about capacity building. And for example, I'm chairman of the Heat and Power Cooling Group, and also at the board. And we have taken a board decision of now working much more with capacity building on city level in Europe. So that is in a plan. But I see a much bigger and challenge and opportunity in bringing out this capacity building and the pre-stage of development supported by, for example, what I'm doing now with UN and others. But I also see that more directed, and I hope that institutions like well, for example, ADB and UN and others, and also within the Asian Pacific Urban Energy Association, I think we should try to also get well, supportive from this more multilateral, bilateral, to actually push out capacity building on city level to much higher extent. And so it starts there. And as I said earlier, it's important at the same time that also we put good showcases in place. It doesn't have to be the whole city at once, but the pilot that later can grow. I think those are the actions that I see. And I see a good momentum, definitely, right now, but it could be much more. To avoid this, as Reggie said, we can expect a threefold of electricity for cooling, and that would be a disaster. We need to do it high efficient solutions for it, and it is possible, and we see it as I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but the average in Europe is about 4.5 times more efficient than the alternative solutions in general in these district cooling systems. And we have, well, examples like in where you're close to the ocean, where you can use free cooling totally, where you can be up to 10 times more efficient. And it's possible to do.
Thank you, Per. I will give the voice to one of the attendees, the audience, who would ask a question. So we have Augustine Antoine coming up. Augustine, you need to unmute.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, my question is going back to the office buildings. I mean, there's a lot of talk about not going back to the old ways, and to make sure that when we return in a post-COVID new normal, that things will be better. but how do you convince the construction bosses and the building owners whose practical livelihood is to occupy these buildings and to fill up the spaces? I mean, there's a good number of people who are now very happy about staying at home, and they realize that it didn't affect productivity and it's possible to maintain the system in a post-COVID new normal. But you need the buy-in of these people. So that's a major mindset change that I see. I mean, I understand the benefits about district cooling and energy efficient buildings, and there's a lot of there are a lot of success stories in Singapore. But my question, sincerely, is I foresee buildings are going to be less than fully occupied in the new normal. Your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Maybe I'll take this question. Thank you very much, Augustine, for this question. And it's a question that shows, the opportunity that cities have to exhibit their foresight in land use planning. There's been a lot of talk about, you're absolutely right, not returning to buildings and what cities can do with these buildings. And there's been a lot of conversations also about multi-use buildings. So instead of designating something as an office building, it could be, an office building today, an event space tomorrow, and pop-up restaurants, next week. So it's not about filling a building with the same group of people day after day, but also reinventing how cities can multi-purpose buildings to meet different needs of the different communities at any given point in time. And so that's one of the ways that cities are looking into changing land use policies. And another one is there's been also a lot of talk about the 15-minute city, where instead of everybody commuting to the central business district from the satellite areas, that everything will be, all the amenities, the workplaces, schools, healthcare, as well as residential spaces will be within a 15-minute commute. And that will reduce drastically the need for people to commute long distances. It will reduce congestion in the city center, and it will build healthier and better quality of life within communities in a 15-minute setting where, parents don't have to rush to pick children from school on a very long commute. And children also similarly, have better air quality, where an area there's less congestion, there's less traffic, and the air quality, for example, is better for those in vulnerable communities, or the aged, or those who have healthcare or respiratory issues. So those are some of the ways that we've been, very engaged with our cities in rethinking and reimagining land use space for the buildings going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add a word, Michael? Got time?
Definitely.
Just, for me also important what you said. Of course, we have to change production of energy, so the generation, and we need to have a better building efficiency. But thanks to the digitalization that I spoke before, I believe we can entering in a new world of knowing better what's happening in a building, giving more more control. For example, the people wanted to come in the office need to control the atmosphere, the air, because tomorrow also the virus contamination could be also one of the parameters. And thanks to that, thanks to the IoT systems, thanks to the virtual twin, we promote a new way of managing buildings. And the new way of managing building brings more opportunity for you to be more flexible, to take back the control of your building and to adapt it, and also to show to the people coming inside, which are who are quite worried about what can happen, some KPI or some indication about everything inside the building. So you increase the well-being and you increase the quality of life.
Thank you, Noah. We have one question from APUEA's father, the founder of IAC, who is the governing organization of APUEA, Mr. Rob Pratt, who asks that the projects tend to be renewable energy or energy efficiency oriented. But obviously it would make most sense, as we say today, also to integrate these projects to each other on a larger scale. So how do we see the development of more large-scale integrated energy systems? I think we can address it to Teru first.
Well, I guess at the project level, there's not much that type of project. Even the ADB project, we focusing only transmission, distribution, or power generation, only renewables, like only wind or only solar, something like that. So at the project level, it's very difficult to have an integrated energy project. But I would say that in China, when we took up in Qingdao City for district heating, and also I think that project is could be the one of the example that the project itself using different mode of the energy for heating, cooling, power generation, at the same time tri-generation, and also the heat source coming from either gas or waste energy or combination of the waste energy. So I think project level it's possible to do it, but again, it's a matter of the city I work with, like a Qingdao city, is willing to do it. If city wants to do it, and then I think it's possible, because the technology is out there, money is out there, everything is out there. But what is lacking is that the willingness or policy that city wants to take up that combined solution. Thank you.
In India, we have done extremely well on the energy efficiency side in last 15 years. About 28,000 megawatt we have reduced load on the grid through energy efficiency, one world's largest LED program. So billions of LED bulbs distributed. It was a central government program reaching entire country, including street light. Half of the street lights we have changed from sodium vapor lamps to LED. So that's a major achievement. And parallelly, we did equipment appliances labeling. So 5-star, 4-star, 3-star rated appliances. So and the efficiency level constantly increased. So overall, I mean, this was a parallel program which has happened along with renewable energy development and other power system development, the rural electrification. All this was going hand in hand. So this particular program, there was a dedicated company formed by Government of India called Energy Efficiency Services Limited. They have done a wonderful job on this LED program and appliance. We also have a Bureau of Energy Efficiency which set all the standards. So there are many things for our neighboring countries to learn and adapt. We had our own share of success and failures, so they could learn from here what went right, what went wrong, and how to take it forward for energy efficiency. I would say we have been talking about the microgrids. So now ISGF, we've been advocating grid interactive buildings. The buildings with solar panels on the top or on the campus, as well as electric vehicles connected to that. Both will act such a way that the whole building can interact with the grid. When the price on the grid is less, you buy and store it. When the price on the grid is high, you could even sell it back to the grid. That's a kind of a market framework which we are bringing in. On the 1st of June, we started real-time market, hour-ahead market we started for the power. And moving forward, all this, the smart appliances, I firmly believe we have been talking about it, these are all going to be grid interactive. The new technologies will facilitate your refrigerator or your air conditioner or your water pump to buy electricity from the cheapest resource on the grid and run its function at a time which is suitable to you as well as it is most economical. So these are all going to be smart contracts executed on blockchain. So IoT, Internet of Things, is moving to blockchain of things. So we have, tomorrow we have ISGF will be hosting a deep down workshop at ACEF on blockchain for utilities. So things are changing fast, and COVID is only going to push this digitalization much faster than what it would have otherwise BAU scenario happened. What would have happened in 2050 perhaps will happen in 2030 with COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reggie, for that. We are running out of time here, so I would apologize for all the questions that we did not have time to bring up on the table. I would like to thank all the participants, and also I would like to thank C40 to participate, and I would like to hand back the word to Jacqueline for some final words.
Thank you very much, Michael. And without further ado, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the audience, especially for staying with us for an hour and a half and for all the very engaging questions that you've sent. On some of the references and resources, I've put in the web links in the chat box, so hopefully some of you are able to access it. If not, just as always, feel free, the C40 team as well as the Asia Pacific Urban and Energy Association team are always contactable on email. If you have any other questions, then we'd be happy to take them via email as well. So once again, thank you all very much for your participation, and hope to stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.